Hey there, welcome to another episode of Frames TM, and today I'm going to talk about the 5 things Nikon will do that will change the market, the camera market in 2024. And 3 things are 3 cameras. 2 things are not specific lenses, but approaches to the lens lineup design. So let's talk about it. Everyone is excited and expecting the Z6 III since the time of the Z8 or even earlier. It's going to be almost 4 years now that the Z6 II and the Z7 II have been out. So although that's the most exciting piece that most of us are actually looking forward to, I'm going to begin somewhere else. Check out my other videos in the channel. I'm going to list down a few videos in the comment section. Just check out my reviews on the long lenses from Nikon, a few Fuji reviews, and a lot of conversation on various topics. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Help me reach 10,000 people, subscribers by the end of this year, which is not very ambitious. I'm going to be very, very happy if I reach 10,000, okay, by the end of this year. And I want to reach 5,000 by the mid of February. So if you're watching me for the second time, third time, or even the first time, do me a favor, subscribe. It doesn't take anything away from you. I think there are a couple of products which together can become more powerful and more important for the larger market, especially from Nikon's point of view. And I think Nikon therefore should really spend some time building them up and releasing them within 2024. Let me begin with the first one. I think it is a Z5 Mark II or Z5 II. The Z5 II is sitting at a price point that's, you almost have nothing at that price point right now. You have the old A7 III selling at a heavy discount, about 1,500 or less US dollars. You have the Canon R8 with the new sensor, the new processor, the new autofocus, but with a lot of compromises, right? It doesn't have IBIS. It has only an electronic front curtain shutter that can go as fast as only 1/4000th of a second. It has a tiny battery that really doesn't last of the full day. Forget full days. It will last you for, I think, 3 hours of shooting. I don't know if it's adequate. I'm sure it's not adequate for most people. And the R8 does not have any IBIS. Now look at the Z5. You don't need to do much for the Z5. It already has a couple of card slots. Yes, the frames per second is low. I think 4.5 frames per second. Since I remember I didn't really pay much attention to Z5 recently, but I think it's quite slow. It's below 5 frames per second, but it has an IBIS and it has a very good professional build quality, Nikon level build quality. So I think you've got a very good chassis. You don't need to really tinker with that much. Just add the XP7 processor power, maintain the same sensor, 24 megapixel sensor with XP7, have all the autofocus capability, maybe not have the bird and animal detect so much in it, or have a smaller version or not so powerful version of that, but make the camera very good for street, portrait and studio photography, okay? And then maintain the IBIS, change the video capabilities in that camera, and I'm expecting that camera to come out not later than mid of 2024. I am expecting that this camera will have D750/Z5 sensor, of course tweaked a little bit, and then also being taken advantage of by the new processor. It should have the IBIS. The frames per second should go up to 7 or 8. You remember the D750 is to have 7.5 frames per second, which is quite adequate for most situations, especially for beginner to even for a lot of wedding photographers. 4K 30 uncropped and 60 cropped. A flip out screen within US dollars 15 to 1600. I would also like to see actually 1080 240 in that camera if possible. 1080 120 uncropped, 1080 240 with a minimal crop. With this camera is going to become a bread of butter for a lot of entry-level professionals, or a lot of professionals who want to have the Z6 III and want to have another body which is not that expensive. Look at it like this. The Z9 users will have the Z8 as a sidekick. The Z8 users will have a Z6 III as a sidekick. The Z6 III users will have a Z5 II as a sidekick. And a lot of Z5 II users will have what as sidekick? Either it's an older full frame camera, which I don't think people would like to carry forward after this, because it's such a vast difference in performance, especially in video. I think the Z5 II is going to be their sidekick. And so if I look at the Z5 II, I think again there's a massive opportunity in sub $1,200 camera market. And I think that's where you recruit more people and get more people from other systems to come in. So very, very important price segment, very, very important camera style for not only the entry level customers, but also people who would like another crop sensor camera along with the Z8 or Z9 for wildlife and birding. So at least it's a camera they can fall back on, lest something goes wrong with their primary camera, which could be Z8 and Z9 for birders and wildlifers. So what do I expect from that camera? I expect an IBIS in the Z5 II. I think now is the time. Look at the XS20. I think the XS20 is a really nice and well packaged camera. What I don't like about it is the fact that it's not weather sealed. I know the Z550 is weather sealed, so Z550 Mark II or 2 will be weather sealed. No worries there. Sony A9 III, 1/8,000 of a second. I was talking about the whole thing with Baron with Photography Discourse, and we were discussing the whole thing about Z5 Mark II, Z5 II, and Z50 II, and we both agree on these few points. And I think that he's right when he said to me that the days of 1/4,000 shutter speed is gone. I believe that. It's the days of fast lenses. The DX24 on 1.7 is slightly faster than 1.8. I mean, you'd like to access 1/8,000 of a shutter speed shutter on a very bright day and use that shallow depth of field. So I expect that 1/8,000 of a shutter, 1/8,000 of a second shutter, 4K 120 uncropped, 15 frames per second while shooting stills with the mechanical shutter, flip up screen like an XC4. I don't want the screen to be flipped down. I want it to be a flip up screen. So that when you place it on a tripod, you can still see your face. Yes, if you put a mic on top, maybe it becomes a bit of an obstruction, but then you can manage the mic. Maybe you put a receiver there and you speak from the wireless mic from here. And there's a cheap, affordable DJI mics that are available, Godox mics that are available right now, wireless mics. So I think the flip up screen is less problematic, but can become a very good photography camera as well, because you don't have to swivel it out and then figure the balance and all that. It's just complex, I think. So a flip up screen, 15 frames per second. It should have the Z30 mic. I honestly believe it should have the Z30 mic. It's very clean and nice, which is, I think, is inspired by one of the ZV cameras from Sony. Now I expect this camera to have animal and bird detect from the Z9, straight from the Z9. Should have as good performance for wildlife as it can have. I want this camera to be not 20 megapixel, but I want this camera to be 26 or 30 megapixels. And I think a 26 megapixel camera is very, very doable, very, very practical, and very, very, very probable, because Sony is using it, Fuji is using it, and I think Nikon is watching the scenario and they understand that if Z9 or a Z8 cropped by 1.5 is going to be about 20 something megapixels. So for someone to have an advantage over a cropped Z9, a Z8, you would like to have a little bit more megapixels. So 30 megapixels is just the sweet spot in my mind. I think it's doable, and I think it's definitely doable between 1,000 and $1,200. I would also like to see IBIS in that camera, because remember, I'm looking at this Z50 II as something that will be used by a lot of people who shoot wildlife and bird. So I think it's expected that this camera will have a single card slot. Let me tell you, while I'm talking about it as if this is my expectation, I think Nikon is already working on these two cameras. I think they're awfully quiet, but I think we are going to see these two cameras come out this year, because I think the trump card for Nikon is not another camera. I think it's already out there, which is the reason I think we are not going to see a Nikon camera for Olympics especially. I think Nikon's energy is well spent on far more critical cameras that the wider market is waiting for. Olympics is taken care of by the lenses. Nikon has 400 2.8 TC, 600 to 4 f4 TC, 400 4.5, 100 to 400. Nikon has a 600 6.3, 180 to 600, and 800 6.3. With those lenses, no other system has such great variety and balance between aperture, light. No other system has this great balance between brightness of the lens, size of the lens, price of the lens, and flexibility within the lens. Remember that 1.4 TC inbuilt in the 400, 2.8, and the 600. There is nothing, no camera is going to undo the advantage of those lenses. Okay. And I think the gift from Nikon for Olympics is going to be unlocking of far more capabilities within the Z9. I think we're going to see 30 frames per second raw in the Z9. Moving on. So that's about how Nikon is going to tackle Olympics in my view, and I'm very bullish about that point of view. I don't think Nikon is going to waste time on a Z9H, which is going to be an extremely niche camera for some people for some time. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see a Z5 II. I think we're going to see a Z50 II. Now, let's talk about a Z6 III. Let's talk about that later, actually. Let's talk about the two other things. I think apart from this two, the important thing is to understand what is the entire ecosystem looking like right now. It looks solid. We have 40 plus lenses, then a lot of third-party lens support. But understand, it is at this point we need to recognize there is a gap between 1.8 lenses and 1.2 lenses. And the gap is huge. Nikon needs to close this gap. Nikon needs to close this gap because what people, and Baron and I talked about it in detail, and I've been talking about it for the last 2 years. And a lot of people said, well, if you have 1.2s, you don't need a 1.4. I understand. They said at that time, and I spoke to Baron, I spoke to Vagan, I spoke to Matt Irwin, I spoke to whoever I spoke to at that point before the 1.2s got released. They used to say, no, we want the 1.4s. I think in their head, what they're trying to say is that at this point, give us the 1.2s first. Let us establish what the Z mount can do very clearly to the market, and then maybe later on. So I think in their head, it was the second thing to look at, and the first thing should have been the 1.2, and that was the point of view. And I think at this point today, we see the gap, and that is where I think Sony has balanced it out superbly. The most popular lenses on the Sony system are the 35 1.4, the 50 1.4, not only their own but the third-party 1.4s, and the Sigma 85 1.4 because the Sony 85 1.4 is long in the tooth. So those 1.4 lenses are amazing. How Baron Photography Discourse articulated it to me is to say that, this is like a portable pro line. I would say this is the affordable portable pro line. These lenses should be sub $2,000. They should be within $1,200 to $1,500. Aggressively priced 1.4s. Compact, well done. It doesn't have to have the brute power of absolute perfection. It is allowed, these lenses are allowed to make sweet small compromises that people will be okay with because the price is such, because the weight is such, and it's going to have a bright aperture. Of course, take care of at least 60% of the center's sharpness. Maybe the rest of the 40% around the corner is fine. I think some of us can let that go if you're not looking for perfection. And if you want perfection, go for the 1.2 lenses. That's the deal. And I think a $1,200 1.4 series is exciting, and Nikon should do that. The second thing, I'm going to talk about the Z6 III last. The second thing about lenses is that, I was watching Matt's discussion with Bobby Tonelli on his channel, and he had almost a couple of hours of conversation yesterday or day before yesterday, where he talked about ZF and how great the ZF is, and how the ZF is building a cult following right now. The ZF is building a cult following. What's missing in the ZF? Well, nothing really. You have the 40 f2 and the 28 2.8. I think the 28 should have been f2. Same emotion from Baron, but that's all right. At this point, what Nikon must do, and I think Nikon is seriously thinking about it, I think Nikon success, the Nikon ZF success means Nikon is seriously thinking about that format of camera. I won't be surprised if Nikon actually launches a higher megapixel ZF. And I won't be surprised if Nikon goes in partnership with other lens manufacturers to make nicely styled manual focus lenses, retro style for the ZF. But I think Nikon will work on f2 lenses like Fuji has done. Fuji has a line of f2 lenses which are beautiful, just right for the Fuji X-T3, X-T4 and X-T5. I'm expecting a similar series, metallic build, not very long, and autofocus, but with the manual controls on the lens. I'm expecting a 24, a 35, a 50 and a 65. I think these focal lengths and possibly a slightly wider lens than 24 if time allows. I mean, it can be next year, but these 4 lenses, f2s, metallic, tactile, autofocus, I think it's going to be super hit lens lineup. And all the ZF buyers will buy at least 50% to 60-70% of this lens lineup, and the rest of the market will buy the Nikon ZF only because you have not now have such nice combination of lens and that camera, great camera. So I'm serious about it. I think Nikon is not blind to the idea of this. I think they're looking at the success of ZF and they're chalking out a plan. They're seeing the market, they're seeing the power of nostalgia and true emotion, okay, and how people want to pay tribute to Nikon's history. I think Nikon should just go ahead and do it. Lastly, let's talk about the Z6 III. And with this conversation, this episode will come to an end. So I've talked about 4 things. I've talked about couple of cameras, Z5 II, Z52, the 1.4 line of lenses and the f2 line of lenses catered and designed for the retro style camera body or bodies, because there could be more bodies to come. We already have a couple, ZF and ZFC. Okay, Z6 III. I've spoken about it. I think I haven't been so undecided about any other camera. I mean, I was so sure about the Z8. I said, convinced that the Z8 was going to be a Z9 mini, Z9 version 2. It turned out to be that. It turned out to be true. And I think the Z6 III is confusing because there are merits to a 24 megapixel camera, there are merits to a 33 megapixel camera, but here is how I have finally resolved the conflict in my mind. If there is going to be a Z7 III, we will see a 33 megapixel camera on the Z6 III, because in that case, the Z6 III will be a best image quality, highest resolution, mechanical shutter, a relatively slow camera, giving you a 61 megapixel image. And Z5 II will give you a 24 megapixel image along with the ZF. Z6 III should sit in between the Z8, Z9 and the Z5 II at 33 megapixels. I think the processor at this stage has the power to crunch all of the data down and not lose the data and then use that for video. The A7 IV already does 7K converted to 4K. I think the Z6 III can do that too. 1/8000 of a second shutter speed, better IBIS than ZF, and with an IBIS lock. Because if you drop that camera with a floating IBIS system, it may get damaged. So I think it should definitely have an IBIS lock. Every camera other than the ZF has an IBIS lock inside the body. 14 to 15 frames per second. 20 megapixel mechanical, because that can be done, because it's not going to be a 45 megapixel, 46 megapixel camera. 33 megapixel, and decent enough data for the processor to handle. So 20 FPS mechanical, same autofocus as the Z9, minus 8 EV autofocus in low light conditions, just like the ZF. So all the goodness from Z8 and Z9 and the ZF. Dual card slot, mixed type, one SD UHS 2 and one CF Express dual. Now for video, 1080 to 40 FPS. I expect that to happen. It's time for it to happen. Okay. take on the A7S III. Honestly, it's an old camera. 4K 120 without a crop, all right, and 6K 30 without a crop. I think all these things are quite doable. And if possible, I think this camera is supposed to be a camera that does everything quite well. So this camera should ideally, with that logic in mind, have the Sony A7R5 type of flip out screen, dual style screen. If not, give it a flip screen and tilt screen. Don't give it a flip out screen, because I think the flip out screen should be reserved for the Z5 too, and it's on the ZF. Z6 should have either a hybrid screen like the A7R4, or it should be a normal tilt screen like the Z8 or Z9. Okay, should definitely have dual base ISO for video and for N-Lock. I think that's going to be a killer feature if it has that. And then a manageable battery grip, not like the Z8. The Z8, I mean, the battery grip, I think Nikon didn't want us to buy that. It's not really manageable. So a decent, manageable, compact battery grip, and priced at $2,399 US. That's what I expect. Not only that, I think Nikon is making these things as we talk. Okay. And with these things, with 80% of all this, Nikon is going to really provide Goldilocks cameras and Goldilocks lenses for most people. I'm not being selfish and being the Nikon guy. I'm saying that this is the camera kind of stuff everyone would like to see, with the kind of files Nikon gives you, the kind of colors they give you, and now the kind of autofocus they give you. I'm very bullish about it this year. We don't have the roadmap. I think the need for the roadmap is over. We are going to see surprises being dropped. I'm going to see you soon with another video soon. Check out my other videos in the channel. I'm going to list down a few videos in the comment section. Just check out my reviews on the long lenses from Nikon, a few Fuji reviews, and a lot of conversation on various topics. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Help me reach 10,000 people, subscribers by the end of this year, which is not very ambitious, but yeah, I'm going to be very happy if I reach 10,000. Okay, by the end of this year, and I want to reach 5,000 by the mid of February. So if you're watching me for the second time, third time, or even the first time, do me a favor, subscribe. It doesn't take anything away from you.